He took $47,300 from me. Then vanished, midway through rebuilding my home. The walls stood half open, wires dangling like veins, rainwater bleeding into the drywall. I called, I texted, I begged. Nothing. Weeks turned into months. Then, one morning, the city inspector showed up at my door, furious. Turns out, the permits weren't even filed. The foundation, the wiring, the gas line, all illegal. My name, not his, was on record. I was facing thousands in fines, possible legal action, even property seizure. All because of him. And while I was tearing through my bank statements, desperate to prove I wasn't the criminal here, I found something buried in the public database: his signature. His name. His license ID. A trail so sloppy it could bury him. That's when I realized. He hadn't ghosted me. He'd tried to erase me. But he forgot the permits. And I was about to remind everyone exactly who he was. Before we dive into the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching this from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and it helps me connect with you all around the world. My name is Claire Morrison, I'm 34 years old, and I manage accounts for a small architectural firm in Portland. You'd think, with my job, I'd have known better. I deal with contracts, quotes, liability clauses, all of it. But when it's your house on the line, your dream kitchen, your life savings, logic fades. It's replaced by this naive belief that people keep their word. In early March of last year, I hired a contractor named Ethan Dahl, owner of Dahl Home Innovations. His reviews were decent, his pitch charming, calm confidence, firm handshake, everything rehearsed to look legitimate. We agreed on a $94,600 renovation, new flooring, expanded kitchen, bathroom remodel, and solar installation. He asked for half up front, $47,300 to cover materials and subcontractors. I wired the payment, signed the paperwork, and watched as the demolition began 2 days later. At first, it was thrilling. Seeing old cabinets ripped out, walls opened, sunlight flooding into what used to be a dark and narrow space, it felt like rebirth. I took pictures, texted updates to my mom, even bought a new coffee machine to celebrate. For weeks, Ethan's crew showed up on time, laughing, blasting classic rock, filling my driveway with trucks and tools. He'd stop by twice a week, clipboard in hand, promising everything's ahead of schedule. Then, they stopped coming. At first, I thought it was weather. Portland rain can freeze a job site overnight. Then I thought maybe a personal emergency. But 3 days became a week, then 10 days. His number went straight to voicemail. The crew? Vanished. Materials, gone. I stood in my gutted kitchen, the smell of sawdust still hanging in the air, wires sticking out like open wounds, and realized I couldn't even cook dinner. My home was a construction graveyard. When I finally reached his office number, it rang to a disconnected line. His website disappeared. The sign on his old workshop, covered with A for lease notice. Every trace of him online looked like it had been scrubbed clean. That's when the real nightmare began. Because 2 weeks later, an inspector showed up, clipboard, hard hat, the whole thing. He said a neighbor had reported unpermitted work. I laughed. Told him my contractor handled everything. He didn't laugh back. He asked for the permit number. I handed him a folder filled with copies Ethan had given me, stamped, dated, everything looked official. He studied them in silence for maybe 30 seconds. Then looked up and said 6 words that still echo in my head. "Ma'am, these documents aren't real." My stomach dropped. The signatures were fake. The permit numbers didn't exist in the city database, and the name listed on the approval stamp, the city clerk, had retired 3 years earlier. I remember my hands shaking so badly, I dropped the papers on the floor. He explained that since my name was listed as the property owner, I was liable for the unpermitted construction. The fine could reach $15,000, maybe more, depending on safety violations. The only way to avoid legal action, he said, was to stop all work immediately, and apply for emergency retroactive permits. Retroactive. Meaning, I'd have to pay again for work that might not even pass inspection. I stood there, surrounded by the mess he left behind. Rain leaking through unfinished drywall, insulation scattered across the floor, outlets hanging from loose wires, and realized that every nail driven into this house was now my problem. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the floor of my half-built kitchen, scrolling through old texts from Ethan. Each one now felt like a lie. "Don't worry, Claire, I've got you covered. City's approved everything, we're in great shape. You'll love the finish on these tiles." Every message, every invoice, every promise. Built on nothing. By morning, I wasn't sad anymore. I was furious. I opened my laptop, poured a cup of cold coffee, and started digging: contractor's license registry, permit databases, county records. At first, I didn't even know what I was looking for. I just needed proof that I hadn't imagined it all, that he existed. And when I finally found his name buried in a digital record, linked to 3 other failed projects, 2 lawsuits, and 1 revoked license, something inside me shifted. This wasn't negligence. It was pattern fraud. And I was going to make sure Ethan Dahl never scammed another homeowner again. It's strange how quickly a house can stop feeling like home. Within weeks, mine turned into something else: cold, hollow, unfinished. Every sound echoed off plywood and exposed beams. At night, the wind slipped through gaps where windows should have been, making this soft whistling sound that felt alive. Like the house itself was exhaling in pain. I kept trying to live normally, working remotely from the living room, wearing noise-canceling headphones to drown out the creaks, but it was impossible. The smell of damp wood, the dust that clung to everything, the echo of what used to be comfort. It was like living in a half-buried memory. Then came the fines. The first envelope arrived in mid-April. $2,750 for unpermitted electrical work. A week later, $4,200 for foundation alterations without inspection. Then another, $6,000 for plumbing violations. Each one printed with my name in bold black letters: Claire Morrison, property owner of record. I wanted to scream. Instead, I started documenting everything. I created a folder on my desktop called House Hell. Inside it, scans of invoices, texts, photographs, even screenshots of Ethan's website before it vanished. I needed evidence, proof of what he'd done. Because every part of me knew, one day, I'd have to defend myself. My neighbors started asking questions. "Hey Claire, is the remodel still going? You know the city's been driving by a lot lately." One even offered me a contractor he trusted, which felt more like pity than kindness. By the end of April, my savings were gone. Every dollar I'd set aside for finishing the remodel went toward stopping legal action. I stopped eating out. Sold furniture. Paused contributions to my 401k. I was trapped, financially, emotionally, physically. I couldn't move out, couldn't sell, couldn't continue the work. That's when I realized. My house wasn't a project anymore. It was a prison cell built from lies. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart racing, certain I heard footsteps in the unfinished hall. I'd grab a flashlight, walk past the gutted kitchen, the bare studs, the exposed outlets, and tell myself it was just the wind. But deep down, I knew the fear wasn't about ghosts, it was about exposure. Every illegal wall, every cut wire, every unfiled permit was a reminder: I was legally responsible for a fraud I didn't commit. And the worst part? I still couldn't prove Ethan had intended to scam me. Without direct evidence, bank logs, internal emails, a recorded admission, the authorities couldn't do much. The detective I spoke to told me flatly, "It's a civil matter. You'll have to sue him." Sue him? With what money? So instead, I kept digging. I found an archived version of his business profile, cached pages that still listed client testimonials and city licenses. But one detail jumped out. The contractor license number he gave me didn't match the one on file with the state. His was off by a single digit. 1 digit. Enough to fool casual checks, but wrong in the official system. It was like he built a ghost company, designed to look real until someone bothered to verify. I called the licensing board, but all they could tell me was that Dahl Home Innovations hadn't renewed its status in 2 years. His insurance had lapsed. His liability coverage was void. And his registered business address? It led to a UPS mailbox in Beaverton. Every step I took led deeper into the maze. And the deeper I went, the more I realized, Ethan hadn't just disappeared. He'd engineered an exit. I remember staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, bare studs behind me, plastic sheeting flapping like a curtain, and thinking, he built this chaos on purpose. He left just enough traces to stay uncatchable, but enough destruction to ruin me. That night, I sat in bed surrounded by permit forms, penalty letters, and my laptop screen glowing in the dark. I started typing out everything I knew, like a confession, or maybe a witness statement. Every date, every call, every payment. I needed a timeline. Something coherent enough to show that this wasn't incompetence. It was theft. By 2 a.m., I had a 19-page document. Names, dates, amounts, even screenshots of Ethan's old Instagram posts showing progress on projects that never finished. And as I looked over it, one thought kept repeating in my head. If he's done this before, there have to be others. That was the moment the fear started to turn into purpose. Because I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. If I couldn't get my money back, I'd get my power back. And that meant finding his next victims. Before he disappeared again, I learned very quickly that paperwork is where liars trip up. If you know how to read the tremor in their signatures, the tiny mismatches in dates, the fraudulent rhythm of a story told on paper. So I made it my job to become a reader of lies. First thing I pulled up was my own bank record, plain, ugly CSV lines of numbers and times. There it was, $47,300, a single outgoing wire on March 9th, sent at 9:14 a.m. The memo line read materials plus subs. Simple enough. Behind that line was a dozen PDFs Ethan had emailed me, estimates, invoices, 2 pages he labeled permit copies. I downloaded everything, renamed every file evidence _ and stored them in 3 places, my desktop, an encrypted cloud folder, and a thumb drive I hid in a book. Paranoid? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely. The invoices were glossy, letterhead, logo, the kind of design that makes people stop asking questions. But when I zoomed in, my eyes caught what cameras sometimes do, tiny inconsistencies. The font on one invoice was slightly different from the font on the permit copy. The date format on his invoice, mm/dd/e, didn't match the city's PDF stamps, dd/mm/yie. Little things. But together they read like a fingerprint. Then I looked at the email headers. I'd never paid much attention to headers before, they felt technical, boring. But headers tell the story a message pretends to hide. The sent from line showed a webmail provider, generic, throwaway. The received lines carried timestamps that didn't match the local time he claimed he sent them from. One email purportedly sent at 11:06 a.m. local time had a header timestamp 3 hours earlier, an indicator the sender had relayed through a server in a different time zone. It wasn't proof of guilt, just proof of movement. Movement that I could follow. I pulled the cached snapshots of his old website, thank you, Internet Archives, and compared the contact page to the signed contract he gave me. The phone numbers were the same, but the business address on the site pointed to a small industrial unit, the registration on the contract pointed to a UPS mailbox. 2 addresses for the same man. 2 stories. What iced it was the invoice line items. The materials list for my kitchen included premium oak subflooring and custom tile, but the receipts attached to that invoice were generic hardware store printouts, no brand, no batch number, nothing that tied those materials to a certified supplier. The solar equipment invoice? A blurry PDF from a small distributor with no delivery signature. It was a paper trail with holes big enough to crawl through. So I followed the holes. I called suppliers listed on the PDFs. One said they'd never received payment for my order, another confirmed they had shipped to a third-party order handler who then redistributed goods to several job sites. That handler's phone number, when traced, led to a voicemail that said, "Please leave your name," and then nothing. I made notes. I wrote down every dead end like a breadcrumb. Next was the permits. The city database was mercilessly organized, good for me, bad for him. I searched the address, expecting to find a permit number matching the paper he gave me. There were entries for my property, yes, but the active permit stopped 2 days before the demolition began. And the permit numbers stamped across Ethan's fake copies? They returned nothing. Blank. I requested logs, transaction histories, from the permit portal. Digital systems keep trails, upload times, user IDs, IP footprints. The portal's admin team was slow, but persistent. When the logs came, they were a small victory. They showed uploads for several permits tied to my address, but the files never passed validation. They were submitted and then removed. The upload timestamps clustered around late nights, after 11 p.m., and the uploader's account bounced between 2 usernames, both created with disposable email addresses. The admin sent metadata, no IPs, no home addresses, but timestamps and machine fingerprints. One machine fingerprint matched other uploads across the region that had been flagged for fraud. Patterns, again. Patterns everywhere. I also discovered community threads, message boards where homeowners swap horror stories. One post, buried 3 pages deep, described a contractor who took deposits, did a sliver of work, and then used forged permits to keep the homeowner quiet when inspectors came by. The user's tone was raw, they're professionals at being invisible. The username included a location that lined up with 2 of the job sites I'd found. I messaged the poster, she replied with relief, she had photos, affidavits, and a ledger showing a string of homeowners charged exactly the same deposit amount: $47,300, $37,100, $52,000, all substantial, all similar. There were bank transfers among these victims, wires to the same intermediary account, then a cascade of withdrawals in cash. The bank blocked my access to full account details without a subpoena, but the pattern was clear: funds arrived, then dispersed, fast, messy, efficient. Driving this home were the timestamps on a contractor progress video Ethan sent, supposedly shot on site. The file's metadata, basic stuff the average person ignores, showed it had been created on a different date than the one written in his email. The video's audio included background noise that, when I slowed it down, matched a recording from another job site in a city 40 miles away. 2 sites, 1 man, simultaneous jobs that he claimed his crew was handling one at a time. He was either impossibly overstretched, or he was scamming multiple people by juggling narratives. By now, my document had grown into a dossier: bank timestamps, email headers, dealer verification calls, community threads, permit portal logs, supplier statements, blurry receipts, and forensic metadata from files he'd sent. Each piece alone could be explained away. Together they became a pressure cooker, suffocating, undeniable. I printed everything. Stacked it. Labeled folders: payments, permits, suppliers, testimonies. I slid a copy under the door of the homeowner from the forum who'd replied to me. She called me back trembling. "He did this to my sister," she said. "Please, what did you find?" Something I hadn't expected happened next. The city investigator who'd first warned me called. He'd reviewed my packet, my messy, angry dossier, and for the first time, his voice changed. "We've been tracking a pattern," he said slowly. "Your data helps. We may have a case to look into coordinated fraud." It wasn't arrest warrants or guarantees. It wasn't closure. But it was the first public acknowledgement that my small, obsessively gathered paper trail had weight. The paper could bruise him. It could, maybe, stop him. And once the paper works, I thought, loud, cold and clear, the rest follows. Silence has a cost. I learned that in the ugliest way possible. Every day Ethan stayed vanished, my bank account bled a little more. Fines. Retainers. Emergency inspections. Temporary fixes to keep the house livable. By May, the number staring back at me from my account balance wasn't just lower than I'd planned, it was humiliating. It started with the city's retroactive permit process. To keep from being hit with liens, I had to file new permits for every inch of the work already done: plumbing, wiring, even the foundation under the bathroom extension. Application fees alone added up to $9,800. The city also required independent inspections before approving the permits, another $3,400. That's over $13,000 just to start fixing paperwork I never should have been responsible for. Then came the stop work orders. A bright orange notice plastered on my front door warning that any further construction without permits would escalate fines to $500 per day. That's when I had to pay a crew just to stabilize the open walls, cover exposed wires, tarp unfinished windows, pump water out of the crawl space. Another $6,700 gone in a single week. I didn't tell my parents. I couldn't. They'd warned me against rushing into a big remodel. I didn't tell my coworkers either. The shame was its own kind of prison. How do you explain to people that you got conned this badly, when your whole job is about reading contracts? I started taking on freelance work at night, doing bookkeeping for small firms, just to keep afloat. My days blurred into spreadsheets at the office, spreadsheets at home, and then walking through a house that looked like a crime scene. Even my cat started hiding under the one intact bed frame left in the guest room, like he didn't recognize the house anymore either. And then, quietly, the neighbors started turning. The older woman across the street left a note under my windshield: "You're bringing the city down on all of us." Someone filed a complaint about construction debris near my property line, which triggered yet another inspection. I could feel their eyes on me when I stepped outside, like they saw me as the problem, not the victim. Ethan's silence was weaponized. He left me to face the noise, the bills, the stigma. He built a ghost version of himself online and let me carry the visible wreckage. One night in June, I sat at my kitchen table, bare plywood, no cabinets, a single lamp running on an extension cord, and wrote out every payment I'd made since March. The total came to $78,400. That's how much Ethan had cost me in 3 months between deposits, fines, and emergency fixes. I stared at that number until the digits blurred. And yet, he still hadn't shown his face. No apology. No email, no demand letter. Just total, calculated disappearance. But the paper trail I'd built was growing heavier. I'd found 3 more victims on the forum. I'd connected their stories. Same pattern, same license number with 1 digit off, same false permits, same cash withdrawals. I began to assemble it like an investigation board, sticky notes on my wall, connecting threads with red yarn. Payments, dates, project addresses. It looked like something out of a detective show, but it was my life. And the more I stared at it, the more something clicked. His license number, the fake one, wasn't random. Each false digit matched a different city district. A cover, maybe, or a signature of sorts. And then there were the permit uploads, the ones the city told me about. They were all made from the same device fingerprint, late at night, but to different addresses. He wasn't just scamming me. He was running parallel scams like a contractor Ponzi scheme, using one homeowner's deposit to start another's demolition, then vanishing before inspections. It was too big for me alone. So I compiled my findings into a single PDF packet, timeline, metadata, testimonies, and sent it to the city investigator who'd called me. This time, I didn't ask for help. I asked for a case number. 3 days later, he replied. Got it. We're opening a file. Don't post anything publicly yet, we're gathering evidence. I sat there staring at that email. Don't post anything publicly yet. I could almost hear Ethan laughing. Because every day I stayed quiet, he could hit another homeowner. He could disappear again. Silence had a cost. And maybe, for him, it was time to pay it. I closed the email, opened my browser, and hovered over the upload button on a homeowner's watchdog forum. My hand shook as I attached the PDFs of the permits Ethan had forged, his name, his license, his fake signatures. Everything. I hadn't clicked post yet. But I was going to. And once I did, I knew there'd be no taking it back. The night I finally hit post, it felt less like revenge and more like confession. My hands were trembling, the cursor blinking over the words. Homeowner warning, contractor named Ethan Dahl, operating under multiple aliases, forged city permits and vanished after taking $47,300. Attached are his fake documents, check your addresses. If he's worked on your home, contact your inspector immediately. Then I uploaded the files, the fake permits, his signature, even the screenshot of his old business registration, and pressed publish. The post went live at 11:42 p.m. Within 2 hours, my phone started buzzing. Comments. DMs. Screenshots. Homeowners from other states claiming they recognized his name. Different company names, same pattern, same exact signature on fake permits. By sunrise, the thread had over 2,000 views. Someone tagged a journalist from the Portland Ledger. Someone else dropped a link to a Facebook group called Contractor Scam Survivors. I joined. The posts there were devastating. Families sleeping in motels while half-built homes rotted in the rain. A retired couple who'd lost their life savings. One woman even uploaded a copy of her permit, and when I zoomed in, I froze. The same smudged signature. The same fake stamp. The same misspelled city inspector name, J. Hendricks, even though the real inspector was G. Hendrickson. It wasn't sloppy. It was deliberate. A forged brand. By that afternoon, the Ledger journalist, Ava Tran, reached out. She said she'd been investigating a string of permit scams since last year, but most victims had incomplete evidence. My post, she said, was the first one that connected the dots. I sent her everything. The invoices. The timestamps. The metadata. She replied an hour later, "You realize you just built a better case file than half the city's fraud division?" It didn't feel like a compliment, it felt like vindication. Like I'd finally been heard. Ava dug deep. She pulled property records, subpoenaed permit archives, and within days, confirmed what I already suspected. Ethan had registered 3 different LLCs in the past 4 years, each dissolved after collecting deposits and leaving unfinished jobs. Total estimated damages, over $650,000. But here's the part that chilled me, one of those LLCs, Dahl Urban Renovations, was still active in the state of Washington. Meaning, he was still working. Still signing contracts. Still collecting money from people who didn't know his face yet. Ava's article hit the paper a week later. Ghost contractor leaves trail of forged permits across Pacific Northwest. It featured my house, the photos, the fake documents, the exposed studs in the background. They blurred my address, but anyone who lived nearby could recognize the street. Overnight, my quiet little neighborhood turned into a local spectacle. Some neighbors looked at me with sympathy. Others with judgment. One even muttered, "Could have just checked his license," as I passed by. I didn't answer. Because by now, I knew the truth: checking wasn't enough when the system itself was blind. And the system was blind. After Ava's article went live, my inbox filled with messages from city employees, anonymous ones. They told me how outdated the permit database was. How multiple logins could use the same contractor ID. How temporary approvals could be printed before verification was complete. Ethan hadn't hacked the system. He'd studied it. Exploited every loophole. He knew that most homeowners trusted documents with city seals. He knew inspectors rarely checked signatures unless someone complained. He knew silence kept victims scattered, ashamed, isolated. And now, silence was breaking. The Watchdog forum turned into a full-on investigation board. People were uploading permits, invoices, even selfies with half-built houses. Some of them cried on video calls. Others cursed. But through it all, they were connecting. And slowly, a pattern emerged: Ethan wasn't working alone. Several permits traced back to the same submission account, but with different contractor names. Meaning someone else was filing the paperwork, maybe a partner, maybe a middleman. A ghost inside the system. That's when Ava found something staggering. In one of the cache databases, she uncovered metadata showing that all fraudulent uploads, every single one, came from a shared public IP block used by an online permit filing service. A third-party intermediary. Someone had set up fake business profiles through that portal to make everything look legitimate. And one of those profiles still had a live contact email. It wasn't Ethan's. It belonged to someone named Lucas B. A subcontractor listed on my original invoice. I remembered him: tall, quiet, beard, always just dropping off materials. He'd been there the day Ethan disappeared. I'd even offered him coffee. Now his name was sitting inside Ava's document, logged beside every fraudulent permit submission. Suddenly, the story wasn't just about a disappearing contractor. It was about a network. A system of ghosts. I printed the new report, pinned it on my wall, and stared at it until the lines blurred together. Ethan, Lucas, the permits, the uploads, it all connected like circuitry. I'd spent months drowning in his silence. Now, I could hear the current humming underneath it. It wasn't over. Not even close. It started as an act of desperation. By that point, I wasn't thinking about strategy or lawsuits. I just wanted the truth to exist somewhere people could see it. Not buried in files. Not behind a journalist's paywall. Visible. Permanent. So I built the permit wall. I printed every document, every fake permit, every invoice, every signed quote, and covered the gutted drywall of my living room with them. Page by page, tape by tape. Each sheet carried a name, a date, a lie. Some were mine, others belonged to victims who'd sent me their evidence after Ava's article. Over 60 sheets in total, ink-stained ghosts staring back at me. Then I took a photo of it. Wide shot. All of it in frame, the peeling studs, the bare insulation, the avalanche of paperwork. The caption I posted on the forum read: "This is what $47,300 and 6 months of silence looks like." I didn't expect what happened next. The image went viral. 20,000 shares in 48 hours. People began calling it the permit wall of Portland. Local radio stations mentioned it. A YouTube channel for homeowners covered it in a 10-minute segment titled "The Woman Who Outsmarted Her Contractor." My inbox exploded with messages: contractors defending themselves, homeowners thanking me, city officials pretending to care. But one message stopped me cold. It came from an unverified account with no profile picture. The subject line read, "Take it down before someone gets hurt." The body of the email said only, "You're making enemies you don't understand. This isn't just Ethan." No signature. No return name. Just a chilling postscript: "You're next." For a full minute, I just sat there, the glow of the screen burning my eyes. I forwarded it to Ava. Her reply came in 5 words: "Don't engage. Save everything. Wait." But I wasn't built to wait anymore. I posted the email, blurred out the address, of course, and captioned it, "Now they're threatening me." Must have hit a nerve. That post broke containment. Within hours, people on Reddit, Twitter, and even LinkedIn were talking about it. Commenters began digging deeper, pulling business filings, matching names. They found Lucas B., the subcontractor, had registered a separate entity 2 towns over, a permit filing service used by dozens of builders. Ava confirmed it within a day. That intermediary service was the digital funnel through which every fake permit had passed. Ethan was the face, but Lucas was the system. Meanwhile, The pressure inside City Hall was boiling. The fraud department launched a formal review, but the statement they issued was predictably bureaucratic. We are aware of the alleged permit irregularities and are conducting an internal audit. Translation: they were scrambling. And me? I was drowning in messages. Some supportive, some hostile. One contractor accused me of ruining small businesses with public shaming. Another called me a liar seeking clout. But then came dozens of victims from across Oregon and Washington sending proof, receipts, photos, timestamps. They weren't just validating me, they were exposing him. Together, we built a shared spreadsheet, a public database cataloging every known fake permit connected to Ethan or Lucas. Addresses, dates, amounts paid. Within days, it held 117 entries. That's when the real hammer dropped. A city council member reached out privately, asking to meet. He didn't speak like a politician, he sounded afraid. He told me, off record, that multiple contractors had complained that Ethan was protected. Someone in the department had been approving temporary permits for his clients long after his license expired. I asked who. He said he couldn't name them, yet. It hit me then, this wasn't just a scam. It was a chain. Every fraudulent approval, every rubber-stamped permit, every vanished deposit, it all threaded through people who looked the other way. I updated the permit wall that night. Added another section labeled Connections. Names of companies that used Lucas's filing service. City departments that cleared Ethan's projects. Even the Shell LLC's Ava uncovered. It wasn't accusation, it was documentation. And the photo of that second wall became bigger than me. Homeowners across the country started creating their own walls. People tagged me in photos of garages plastered with bills, emails, court letters, physical monuments to the lies they'd lived through. It became a movement, unplanned, raw, furious. But beneath the celebration, I felt it, that faint vibration of danger. The warning in that anonymous email wasn't idle. Twice, I noticed unfamiliar cars idling outside my house. Once, a drone hovered near my window for a full minute before disappearing. And then came the package. No return address. Just a thick envelope with one sheet inside, a photocopy of my driver's license. Nothing else. I remember staring at it, feeling that strange duality, terror and clarity intertwining. They were watching. They were scared. Which meant they were losing. I taped that photocopy right in the center of the permit wall. Then I took a deep breath, looked straight into the lens of my phone, and hit record. You wanted me silent, I said, voice steady. You wanted me buried under your paperwork. But you forgot, I know paperwork. I built my life on it. So here's what's going to happen. Every lie you filed, every permit you faked, every dollar you stole, I'm turning it back on you. One form at a time. The video racked up 1.3 million views in 48 hours. And somewhere out there, I knew Ethan saw it. Because for the first time in months, his silence broke. A new email arrived. Subject line, we need to talk. The subject line, we need to talk. 5 words that stopped my breath. It came from an email I hadn't seen before, Ethan Projects at protonmail.com. Encrypted. Disposable. But unmistakably him. The message was short. Take down everything. You've made your point. You're not as clean as you think. If you keep pushing this, you'll regret it. That last line. I read it a dozen times. Not a threat, a promise. I forwarded it to Ava immediately. She replied almost instantly, don't respond. Every word he sends is bait. But I didn't delete it. I couldn't. There was something off, something calculated. Like he wanted me to know he was still watching, still pulling strings. And then came the lawyers. 3 days later, a man in a gray suit showed up at my door with a thick envelope. A defamation notice from a firm I didn't recognize. It accused me of willfully damaging the reputation of a licensed contractor through slanderous and defamatory online posts. It demanded I remove the permit wall, my posts, and every public mention of Ethan's name within 72 hours or face civil litigation seeking $250,000 in damages. I laughed out loud when I finished reading. It was the kind of hollow, disbelieving laugh that shakes instead of relieves. Because the letter wasn't from a real law office. It looked real, letterhead, formatting, all of it, but the address traced back to a co-working space. Fake. Like everything else about him. Still, the intent was clear. He was testing me. Seeing if I'd fold. Instead, I called Ava. We met that evening at a coffee shop downtown, dark corner, low lights, a laptop between us. She read through the letter, expression unreadable. When she looked up, Her eyes were sharp, electric. "He's bluffing," she said. "But this means something's coming. He's panicking." Panicking. The word almost made me smile. She leaned in closer. "We're about to turn the heat all the way up. But we have to play this smart. If you post anything new, he'll use it to claim harassment. Let me do the next move." That night, Ava published a follow-up article. Fraud victim threatened with fake lawsuit after exposing permit scandal. It was concise. Brutal. Perfect. Within hours, the fake law firm's website disappeared. But so did Ethan. Again. No trace, no response. His online presence went dark, no posts, no listings, no profiles. But this time, I wasn't the only one hunting him. The Ledger's legal team had filed a request for his corporate records, and the city fraud division had opened a formal case, this time not against a contractor, but against an entire permit filing ring suspected of laundering deposits through shell companies. Lucas's name was all over the internal documents. And yet, the threats didn't stop. Late one night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're ruining innocent people's lives. Take the wall down." Another message followed. "We know where you live." This time, I didn't forward it. I screenshot it, printed it, and taped it to the center of the permit wall, right under the fake lawsuit letter. By morning, the forum where I'd first posted my story had exploded. People started flooding the thread with comments, photos, and leads. One user uploaded a photo of Ethan, recent, timestamped from a security camera at a hardware store in Tacoma. It was him. Same posture, same face. But this time, he was wearing a different name tag, Dan L. Ava verified it through another homeowner, someone who'd just signed a $62,000 contract with Dan L. for a backyard addition. He'd been using an alias. And he was still active. That's when I decided to stop waiting for institutions to do their job. I created a timeline map, a visual web showing every address, project, payment, and false permit connected to Ethan or Lucas. I added the hardware store photo in the center, labeled last sighting. Then I posted it everywhere, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, with the caption, "If you've seen this man, check your permits." The post went viral again. But this time, the attention reached someone unexpected, a local construction watchdog nonprofit. They contacted me privately, offering to help authenticate the evidence for law enforcement submission. It felt like momentum. Real, unstoppable momentum. Until, one morning, I woke up to a sound I hadn't heard in months. Hammers. Outside, in the cold Portland fog, a truck was parked in my driveway. The logo was new, Blue Ridge Contracting. 3 men were unloading equipment. I opened the door and shouted, "Who authorized this?" One of them, middle-aged, quiet, wearing a dark jacket, looked up. "We were told to come finish the job," he said. I froze. "By who?" He hesitated, then pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. A work order. The signature at the bottom, shaky, almost illegible, was mine. But it wasn't. It was a forgery. I felt my knees weaken. He wasn't just threatening me now, he was setting me up. I called the police, voice shaking, explaining everything. By the time they arrived, the crew had left, fast, quiet, leaving behind the fake work order as proof. The officer glanced at it and said, "You should probably talk to your lawyer." My lawyer. As if I had one. That night, I sat on the floor surrounded by all my folders, photos, and recordings. Every piece of evidence felt like it was turning against me, like he'd flipped the story, made me the unreliable one. But then, buried deep in my folder, I found it, the email header from his first message to me back in March. The one where he'd attached the official permits. I reopened it and noticed something I'd missed. The original header had a metadata signature and auto tag from the same public filing service Lucas used. Ethan hadn't just forged documents. He'd used the same portal to send them. The digital fingerprint was identical. If I could prove that connection, I could end this. Not just expose him, but dismantle the entire network. My hands shook as I called Ava. "I think I have it," I whispered. She didn't hesitate. "Then it's time to go public. All of it. Full drop." And that's how the counterattack turned. He tried to bury me under fake lawsuits, fake crews, fake fear. But this time, I had the receipts. And I was about to weaponize every single one. The morning I decided to go public, Portland was soaked in rain, the kind that doesn't pour, just seeps, whispering through every crack. It felt fitting. 6 months of rot and silence, and now everything was finally about to come out. Ava and I met in her newsroom before sunrise. She had the tone of someone about to strike a match inside a gas-soaked room. On the table between us sat my flash drive, labeled in shaky handwriting, evidence_final. Inside it were months of obsession. The metadata links between Ethan's fake permits and Lucas's submission accounts. Email headers tying the same upload device to multiple fraudulent projects. Witness statements from homeowners in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. The falsified work order he'd planted at my house. And, most damningly, a crosscheck Ava had verified, a city clerk's credentials used to rubber stamp permits while she was on maternity leave. It wasn't a mistake. It was an inside job. At 9:12 a.m., Ava hit upload. The article went live under the title, "The Ghost Network, Inside the Permit Scam That Cost Homeowners $1.2 million." It wasn't just words. It was evidence, visuals, screenshots, voice recordings, permit comparisons, even a heat map showing where the fraudulent submissions had originated. The story spread faster than we could refresh the page. Within an hour, it was trending statewide. Within 2, national outlets were calling. By noon, the mayor's office had released a statement. "We are aware of the allegations surrounding fraudulent contractor permits and have opened an independent investigation into the handling of permit approvals." Translation: they were cornered. And for the first time in months, I felt it, the power shifting back. But exposure doesn't come quietly. By late afternoon, my phone was burning with notifications. Journalists wanted interviews. Victims wanted updates. Lawyers wanted representation. My street filled with camera vans. I stood behind the window, half proud, half terrified. My voice was everywhere, but my home, the half-built shell of it, looked exactly the same. And then, as if scripted, the story detonated again. A whistleblower from the city's building department came forward. She confirmed everything. Said she'd been pressured to fast-track certain contractor submissions under orders from a supervisor named Lucas Bowers. Lucas. He wasn't just Ethan's accomplice, he'd been working inside the system. Approving his own fraudulent permits under city authority, pocketing expedited processing fees, and splitting the profits with Ethan's shell companies. Ava's team cross-checked the data. It matched. Every fraudulent upload, every timestamp, every approved document had passed through Lucas's credentials. They called it Permit Gate. By the second evening, both Ethan and Lucas had gone completely silent. Phones disconnected, businesses scrubbed. But the article had already triggered a public records dump. Hundreds of homeowners began submitting claims, and the city had no choice but to suspend the entire digital permit filing portal pending security review. The system they'd used to scam me shut down. And that night, just after midnight, an unmarked black SUV stopped in front of my house. For a split second, panic clawed up my spine. I stepped back from the window, heart pounding. Then the lights flashed blue and red. 2 detectives. Plainclothes. They asked if I was Claire Morrison. When I nodded, the older one handed me a business card and said, "Ms. Morrison. You started something bigger than you realize. We're serving a warrant tonight. You'll want to see this." He showed me his tablet, live feed of an arrest. Lucas, in handcuffs, outside a suburban house in Beaverton. Ava called 20 minutes later, breathless, ecstatic. "They've got him. The whole digital trail's being seized." And Ethan? Still missing. But not for long, because when the police pulled the data from Lucas's laptop, they found something unexpected, an entire folder named all_archive. Inside were encrypted PDFs, contracts, permits, bank transfers, and videos. One of those videos was timestamped 2 weeks after Ethan vanished. In it, he sits at a desk, half drunk, slurring, bragging to the camera. "No one's gonna catch me. Claire thinks she's smart, she's just noise. Paper noise. By the time she files her next permit, I'll be gone." That one clip, 38 seconds, was enough. It was confession, motive, and mockery in one frame. Ava embedded the video in a follow-up piece titled, "He called her noise. She brought the system down." I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Because that was the first time anyone publicly said it out loud, what I'd actually done. In less than 24 hours, Permit Gate had evolved into a movement. Thousands of homeowners were now uploading their own documentation to a shared archive, tracking every fraudulent contractor in the region. My original permit wall, the one I built out of rage and exhaustion, had been replicated in over 20 cities. And yet, as the adrenaline faded, I felt something I didn't expect: emptiness. The victory was real, but the damage remained. The house was still half ruined, the bank account still hollow. I'd burned through my savings, my sleep, my privacy. The world was cheering, but I was still living inside the wreckage. And somewhere out there, Ethan was still free. Until that moment, I thought exposure was the end. I was wrong. It wasn't the end. It was the setup for the trap. By the time Ethan was finally arrested, 9 months had passed since the first hammer struck my kitchen wall. 9 months of fines, fear, and fighting. 9 months of headlines and silence. He was caught in Spokane, hiding under a false name, Daniel Lane, working at a renovation site registered to one of his dissolved LLCs. They found him because of a stupid mistake. He'd used his real driver's license to rent a van. Ava called me the night it broke. Her voice was trembling, not with nerves, but triumph. They got him, Claire. He's in custody. Multiple counts: fraud, forgery, wire theft, conspiracy. When I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stared at the flickering bulb in my half-finished hallway and whispered, "Finally." The trial began 6 months later. State of Oregon versus Ethan Dahl and Lucas Bowers. It opened in a cold courtroom with too many fluorescent lights and not enough truth. The prosecution laid it out methodically: Ethan, the front man; Lucas, the insider. Together they'd forged 118 permits, siphoned over $1.2 million, and falsified dozens of business documents to keep the scam alive. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution. My hands shook so violently I had to grip them together. Ethan looked thinner, paler, but his arrogance hadn't aged a day. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Lucas, in contrast, looked broken, sweating, eyes red, head down. He'd already flipped. He'd taken a plea deal in exchange for testimony. When he took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. He explained everything: how he'd met Ethan through a contractor referral group, how Ethan had bragged about gaming the city's online permit system, how Lucas had been recruited to file fake approvals through his government access account in exchange for a 30% cut. He described how Ethan had designed fake permit templates, forged digital seals, and convinced homeowners the projects were legitimate. He even admitted to planning that fake work order at my house, Ethan's idea to rattle her, keep her quiet. And then the prosecutor played the video. The one I'd seen 100 times, Ethan drunk, laughing, sneering into the camera. When it ended, the room stayed frozen. The prosecutor didn't say a word. She just turned toward the jury, then toward me. That's when Ethan looked up. For the first time. His stare was sharp, cold, venomous. But underneath it, fear. He'd built his empire on silence, and now he was watching it crumble in public. The defense tried everything. Claimed I'd smeared his reputation online, that I'd incited a digital mob. They even accused me of tampering with evidence, suggesting I'd edited the metadata myself, but Ava's forensic tech dismantled that lie in 5 minutes. Every timestamp, every digital fingerprint, every server log matched the city's records. There was no manipulation. Just truth. Layered, documented, relentless truth. When the verdict came, it didn't feel real. Guilty on all counts. Ethan received 12 years in state prison. Lucas got 4, reduced for cooperation. The judge ordered restitution, $812,000 to be distributed among verified victims. It wasn't enough, not really. The money was symbolic, pennies compared to the chaos. But when I walked out of that courtroom, into the crisp Oregon air, something heavy finally fell off my chest. For the first time in nearly 2 years, I could breathe. Still, justice doesn't look the way you imagine it. It's quieter. Slower. Less cinematic. The reporters asked me how I felt. I said the truth: it doesn't give me back my house. But it gives me back my name. That night, I went home, to a rebuilt living room, clean drywall, new paint, and stood in front of the permit wall. I'd left it up, framed now, glass covered. Every fake permit, every letter, every email. It looked less like rage and more like history. I pressed my palm against the glass and whispered, "It's over." But part of me knew it never truly would be. Because people like Ethan don't just vanish when the gavel drops, they linger in systems, in loopholes, in the cracks of trust we never think to check. Ava called a week later. The Ledger was publishing a book on the scandal. She wanted to include my name on the cover, The Permit Wall: How One Woman Exposed a $1.2 million contractor fraud. I said yes. Not for fame. Not even for closure. But because maybe, just maybe, someone would read it before hiring their next licensed contractor. The courthouse had cleared hours ago. The city lights outside flickered in reflection across the polished floors. As I passed the courtroom door one last time, I saw it, an envelope taped to the frame. No label. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. Clean. Minimal. The system isn't clean, Claire. You cleaned one corner. That's all. No signature. But I didn't need one. The handwriting on the folded flap, just 2 letters, scribbled in blue ink, said enough. E.D. I used to believe justice was loud. That it came with flashing lights, pounding gavels, and news anchors announcing victory. But when the storm finally passed, what I felt wasn't triumph, it was silence. Heavy, echoing silence. After Ethan's sentencing, reporters stopped calling. The city moved on. The permit gate headlines faded into memory, replaced by newer scandals, fresher outrage. My face disappeared from the news crawl. The camera crews stopped parking outside my house. For the first time in almost 2 years, the air around me was still. I didn't know what to do with it. The repairs dragged on. Even after restitution payments, I still had to cover almost $40,000 out of pocket. I'd gone back to full-time work, quiet, stable bookkeeping for a property firm that had followed the story closely. Sometimes, when a contractor's invoice crossed my desk, I'd freeze mid-keystroke. Just staring at the numbers, at the name in the corner, waiting for some familiar wrongness to jump out. It never did. But the muscle memory of vigilance never left. The house finally passed inspection that winter. I still remember the sound, the final stamp, the inspector saying, "You're good to go." It should have felt like redemption. Instead, it felt fragile. Like any moment, the floor beneath me could open again. I didn't rebuild the permit wall. I kept every sheet, every photograph, every receipt, but sealed them in a wooden chest in my basement. I couldn't bear to look at it anymore, but I couldn't throw it away either. It wasn't evidence anymore. It was relic. Proof of who I had to become. Some nights I sit by the window, the same one that once faced a half-built wall, and I think about Ethan in prison. I imagine him pacing in a concrete room, no tools, no clients, no contracts, just the sound of his own lies echoing back at him. I used to fantasize about confronting him, asking why. But now I realize the why doesn't matter. The lie was never personal, it was a business model. He didn't pick me because of who I was. He picked me because the system made me possible. A homeowner who trusted paper more than people. So I started something new. Every Friday night, I host a small online workshop for homeowners, Know Your Paper. It's not glamorous. It's a Zoom call where I teach people how to read permits, spot fake signatures, cross-check contractor IDs. At first it was just 5 people. Now it's hundreds. Some nights, I can see faces from other countries, India, Canada, South Africa, nodding through the screen as I say the same sentence that once broke me. If it's not in the database, it doesn't exist. Sometimes, after the sessions, people message me privately. They tell me their stories. I always listen. And I always tell them the same thing I wish someone had told me: don't mistake silence for peace. It's just the quiet before truth surfaces. Ava's book came out last spring. She gave me the first signed copy. On the dedication page, beneath her neat handwriting, she'd written, "For Claire, who made paper bleed." The irony still makes me smile. Last month, the city sent me a letter, an official notice that new permit protocols had been implemented. Mandatory dual verification. Logged IP tracking. No more single-user approvals. The system had changed. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. I pinned that letter to my refrigerator. It's the only paper I keep visible now. Sometimes I still think about the envelope I found outside the courtroom. You cleaned one corner. I kept it. The signature, E.D., wasn't proof of anything the police could use, but I didn't need proof. I knew he'd sent it before being transferred. I think he wanted the last word. He didn't get it. Because my last word isn't for him, it's for everyone who ever got buried under bureaucracy, tricked by charm, silenced by fear. If I've learned anything, it's that justice doesn't arrive with sirens. It starts as a whisper, a refusal to stay quiet, a hand that keeps digging, even when everyone tells you to stop. Ethan built his empire on fake paper. I built mine on real evidence. He thought disappearing was the end of his story. He never understood, disappearance isn't escape. It's confession. And now, when I lock my door at night, I don't hear the wind through unfinished walls anymore. I hear something else. The hum of a house that finally feels clean. Final line. He stole my money, my time, my peace, but I stole his silence. And turned it into justice.